Welcome to another episode of Legal for Tech, the podcast. So, guys, you do recognize my voice. It's always Rosie here. And as I've said many times, this is just a group of students and young professionals who are very interested in anything that has to do with technology. And yes, it's regulation. So, I'm again joined by my friend and colleague and producer of this podcast, Giacomo Di Gregorio. Hi, Giacomo. Great to see you.
Hi, Rosie, great to see you. Finally, we don't have the sun anymore in Brussels, so I'm calling you from a dark Brussels.
That's really sad. We've actually had really good days here in Germany as well, but I'm told that it will be raining tomorrow. So I'm not waiting for that. I'm really not expecting that. But we have now called another friend of, well, now friend of the podcast. I've decided that you're a friend, Bennett. Um, Great to see you and great to introduce you to our audience. It's Bennet Iorio. I guess that the pronunciation is the Italian one, isn't that?
Exactly. Well done.
Yeah, see, wow. How did she do that?
Hmm.
Welcome to Legal Protect the podcast, Bennett. It's a great pleasure to have you, especially because, I mean, you're doing something so incredible that we had to shout it out to the world. I mean, Legal Protect the podcast, maybe not the world, but, a portion of it. Uh, so I'm going to ask you, what brings you here, basically? So let's give a bit of a look to your career, like what you've been doing so far, and yeah, why you're here on the Legal Protect the podcast.
Firstly, thank you, Rosie. Thank you, Jack. It's tremendous to be here. I really appreciate it. And I think that you guys are also doing something incredible with this podcast. Education is what we need. And as befits the name of my organization, which is the Geopolitical Insight and Education Foundation, I'm a big fan of insights in education. How I got here. So I founded the think tank 2 years ago. And I think that we'll roundabout get to my background. Founded it 2 years ago with the focus of protecting stability and resilience in our democracies. How do you protect stability and resilience in our democracies? I think it's a medium-sized question, at least. We think that the way that you do that is by looking at the drivers of instability in our democracies and then trying to find leverage points where we might, in some small way, affect for the better by doing research and then advocacy on those leverage points. And this all started from a question that fundamentally I think a lot of people are talking around, and that is there seems to be a generalized crisis in democracy these days. I think I'm probably not the first person to say that across the world, not just in one circumstance, not just one society, not just one system, there are issues that seem to be cropping up and causing pressure on our democratic systems versus the turn of the century. So we set out to try to answer what are those drivers of instability? What's changed that's made this generalized crisis? And can we do anything about it as a small, young think tank? Our theory essentially is that there are three interlocking drivers of instability, and these are systemic things that have changed that have made instability in every society, actually not even just our democracies, but societies across the globe, much more common. And the first, I think you'll be unsurprised to hear, is technological acceleration. So that includes AI, not only AI, also questions about social media, about everything that comes with the information age. The second is geopolitical. So the systems that we engage in as a society on the international stage. So whether it's hard power, political power, economic power, soft power, the structures that used to be arranged in big blocks, often against each other, are now much more fluid. So you can be simultaneously politically allied, but maybe economically adversarial. So there's a lot more chaos in the international system. And you can see that with the rise in conflicts and disputes. And then the third is environmental. And we mean that in the grandest sense. There is, of course, climate change, but there's also everything else. There's energy and resources, all of the systems that govern how we live on the planet, demographics, people movements. So we think those three things have changed fundamentally for not necessarily the worse, but more unstable, and that's affecting the systems that our democracies exist in. And a lot of these pressures need to be addressed. So that's, in short, what the GIE Foundation does. The name is a mouthful, I'm very well aware. I've often said that it sounds a little bit Orwellian. I don't think it comes from an Orwellian basis. I think trying to support democracy is quite a good thing. But then we truncate it to GIEF. And then there's always the question of how you pronounce that. It's not very euphonic. For Latinate speakers, it might be GF. For Germanic speakers, it might be GIEF. So GIE Foundation is what we usually go with. Shall I stop there?
Yeah, we are for sure curious about the technological advancement because that's what we talk about usually in this podcast, but also, of course, the other ones are really, really interesting, and we're looking forward to know more about. But putting the focus now on the AI, we know that you wrote a letter about how to make a safe AI. Can you tell us more about the process of writing it up? How did you manage, like the press? What kind of response you were expecting to receive?
Absolutely. So I have been so grateful to see such a powerful response thus far. We launched our open letter on responsible AI in science last Wednesday. And after the first 72 hours, we already had over 100 signatories, 35 institutional endorsements from 25 countries on 5 continents. And it's also from such a wide cross-section of society. There are AI experts, there are academics and academic institutions, there are scientists, there are policymakers, there are journalists. A few shout outs, if I could. We've had institutional endorsements from the University of Cambridge, Minderoo Center for Technology and Democracy, from Slow AI, from the European Nexus on Strategic Intelligence, from the Swiss AI Academy. So we're very excited about that. And also lots of personal endorsements. And there's so many that I could name, and I don't even know where to start, but just a few prominent names, I think, are Professor Gina Neff and Dr. Dorothea Bauer and Dr. Sam Illingworth. And really, the response has been tremendous. But I recognize that I haven't told you what the letter actually is about yet. So I'll step back just a second. The letter is a campaign tool. The campaign is responsible AI in science. So we were talking about these drivers of instability in our democracies, in our societies. We found what we think is an important leverage point. So we want to try to protect trust in the scientific record, the integrity of the scientific record. The integrity of the scientific record is a bastion of epistemic trust in society. We think that, unfortunately, it looks like a lot of trust has gone out of politics, of the media. You'll probably be unsurprised to hear me say that. In fact, a fair amount of trust may have already gone out of science. Many of the problems in science are fairly well known. But in principle, I think it is still societally accepted that science can settle what is true and what is not. So the idea behind protecting the integrity of the scientific record is that it protects all of epistemic trust in society. And if you don't have trust in society, it's hard to see how we'll form any coherent, effective policies or confront the challenges of the 21st century, or even have a democratic conversation at all, because a democratic conversation a democracy depends on debates on policy and priority, but not on basic facts. So, okay, what's the danger to the scientific record? The danger is that generative AI has made it very easy to generate poor, low-quality material. And some frightening stats are that in 2023, 0% of all papers, according to a reputable study, were majorly written by AI or had all of their data or references done by AI. By 2024, it looked like that was 17%, and the trend is accelerating. There was also a study from the ICLR conference, or a finding from the ICLR conference, that 21% of the peer reviews were totally generated by AI. So it's frightening because you can see how potentially low quality material could enter the scientific record, and then it would be quite hard to audit. And the mechanisms that we use to keep the scientific record integral, which are peer review, replication, correction, just aren't prepared for the scale that generative AI allows. So what do? We used a framework that I'm quite a big fan of called INT to try to find a leverage point, and it's importance, neglectedness, and tractability. And trying to work out where this leverage point is, we did some research in 2025, and the paper was called Managing the Risks of Generative AI in Academic Publishing. What we found and what we based this campaign on is that there are tens of thousands of institutions that produce science, and there are tens of thousands of institutions that require or consume science, and that's on both sides: labs, universities, companies, everything. There are, however, only 12 organizations that publish preponderance, maybe upwards of 70% of all science. And those are the major academic publishers. Nature, Elsevier, CUP, OUP, that kind of thing. We are calling for a gold standard framework. We want to work with the publishers, along with a coalition of AI experts, regulation experts, policymakers, academics, scientists, public voices, to build a task force that will then build a framework on enforcement, disclosure, and detection. And in so doing, we think at this pressure point, while this window is still open, and it might not be for that much longer, we can protect the integrity of the scientific record and thus protect trust in society. That's the goal.
I love how you make it sound so simple. And that's the goal. Yeah. Well, I have a couple of questions actually. One of them is related to the kind of process that you described using this. I'm quoting from the letter. Look at me. We analyze the AI policies of the world's top 12 academic publishers. And as you said, also right now. You know, scientific publishing is sadly not very egalitarian. For example, most AI-related content comes from the United States. When you look at any paper published on the topic of generative AI, majority of the red teaming papers, they all come from big institutions like Harvard, Stanford, MIT, and so many more available. I am wondering, how are you ensuring, for example, that the framework that you're building together with these publishers keeps track and keeps in mind and potentially involves smaller institutions that have not had a voice until now? Because smaller institutions have been probably publishing decent papers. I'm not saying I have no clue specifically of the numbers, but getting a peer review from an Harvard laureate, of course, gives you a much greater stance than to stand in the academic research field. So I'm wondering, how do you involve and how do you preserve the right of smaller institutions so that then they don't become automatically discarded because they are not big names?
Yeah, it's a great question. And actually, it gets at so many different threads that we want to touch and pull at. So, one is absolutely that there's a finance question. Two is there are some very well-known problems in academic publishing, in scientific publishing. And by the way, we're actually going to be putting out a paper in our second program. This Responsible AI in Science campaign is our first program, our advocacy campaign. And then we have a second program, just as a very brief aside, called The Drivers of Instability and Effects on Our Democracies. And that's a commentary series, and that's essentially research and advocacy papers, policy recommendations, with our network that's upwards of 20 plus contributors and researchers, et cetera, on everything from 3 weeks ago with Lucas Liristom, the CEO of transparentaudio.ai, on institutional trust. I think next week with Brent van der Hayden, the CEO of Map Atlas, on data sovereignty. There's a team of four researchers led by Davide Iannace in Sapienza University in Rome on European defense integration, space governance, data sovereignty as well. So interesting stuff. And we're going to be putting out a paper in a few months' time on general problems in scientific publishing and in the science ecosystem. So look out for that. But to get back to the core question, the problems, I think, are well understood. The replication crisis, publisher perish, perverse incentives, lots of questions about finance. I think that's why I'm so excited about an open letter as a campaign tool, because as you'll have seen from the open letter, anybody can sign, and voices that maybe wouldn't have gotten the opportunity in a pay-to-play system absolutely feature on the open letter and do have a voice. And so the coalition that we build, when and if we do get to build it, I want to make sure that it includes everybody from all walks of life, from all areas of the globe, from various different backgrounds and expertise. That's how you make a gold standard framework.
And how, I have like three short questions. How do you ensure that epistemic knowledge is preserved? And also, how do you define epistemic knowledge? And finally, who selects which knowledge is worth preserving?
Well, it's a great question. And it's a tricky one, too. I almost want to say, well, who am I? I'm not an expert. I run a think tank, and my background is in politics and political advisory, and convening and campaigning. And so I always want to defer to scientists on matters of science, to policy experts on matters of policy. If I had to answer off the cuff, I would say that the more inclusive and the more comprehensive a framework anybody can build in the science ecosystem for what is considered verifiable and then what enters the scientific record is surely the best basis possible for epistemic trust. The more voices you have and the more corroboration and correlation that you have from different vectors should, in my view, bear out any proposition or proposal.
Bent, I'm going to ask you a very bad question that you can say I do not want to answer that, but because you are coming from a political background, my question is going to be, are you a woke institution?
I don't really know what a woke institution would be. I think that, like many political terms or societal political terms, woke means many different things to many different people. Do I believe in inclusivity? Of course. Do I believe that different voices from different backgrounds matter? Of course. Do I believe in meritocracy? Of course. Does that make me woke? That's for you to decide, I think.
But the question is, do you believe in global warming? Because I think that's
I can see. All right. So yes, absolutely. We do a fair amount of research on climate topics. I think that climate change is, of course, a very serious systemic issue that we need to address. It's one of the three pillars of instability that we've been focusing on. And not just climate change, but everything that comes from it, everything that's going to happen to our societies, everything that's actually already happening to our societies in so many ways, both sort of psychologically and then also very materially on energy, et cetera. So absolutely, that is an issue. One of the greatest challenges of the 21st century. Unfortunately, we seem to have so many great challenges in the 21st century that I can't say that it's the only challenge of the 21st century, but absolutely right up there at the top, no doubt for me.
I actually liked how you kind of scaled it up. Yes, it's a challenge. I don't know if it's like I don't know how to rank these challenges because that was going to be my next question. I absolutely love the meaning of the letter. I think it's great in terms of scope. Also because I would say it's a rather, I wouldn't say it's narrow, but it's very specific. So you went on like a scientific kind of produce knowledge, you went to peer review, you noticed the kind of references, you have also published a report, if I'm not mistaken, which is called Managing the Risks of Generative AI in Academic Publishing. I came prepared. But with like literally, lawsuits being filed in the US because children have been committing suicide potentially because using I think character AI was the one, but I think also ChatGPT is in one of the lawsuits. Is this really our priority? Should we really worry about this? And why should this be something to keep track of and to keep being worried about?
So it's a great question. There are so many potential use cases for AI, LLMs, various different types of AI agents, and also so many potential harms. And absolutely, we need to be very cognizant of all of the potential ramifications of any technological tool, actually, that we create and then use and allow it to proliferate. Our view on why this is highly important now is because the window is rather short for us being able to do something about it. We all know, for example, what some AI written tells are. So the M dashes, the tripartite lists, the it's not this, it's that framing. And yet, as we've seen with deepfakes, while these tells were very obvious in the beginning, they're rapidly getting less obvious. And if the window closes on being able to require disclosure because the preponderance of evidence suggests that there has been AI use, then we'll be in the situation that I earlier described, where it's very hard to see why we would or how we would maintain epistemic trust in the scientific record. And so there are many, many potential harms and use cases. I always say I'm not anti-AI, by the way. I use AI tools all the time. I'm for responsible AI. This issue is a leverage point that we can act at right now. And if we don't, we might not be able to ever again. So I think there is urgency as well as tractability to the issue. It is also a neglected vector, and that makes it one that should get the light of day, and it's important.
And in terms of like, you said I don't hate AI, and I agree with you. Actually, I think some things done with AI are absolutely great. And I have to say, Google overview is also quite helpful at times. My question though is all generative AI content used in science bad? As you said, I don't hate AI, I use AI. So how do you then make the difference?
No, so I have a very clear answer. No, not all bad. Definitely not. In fact, there are so many advancements that are already being attributed to the incredible data parsing capabilities, pattern recognition capabilities of AI. And I think that actually anybody who is not using AI tools to help stress test their thinking, build their structures and ideas, is missing a trick. I like to make the joke about people who say no AI for me. It's a little bit like saying, well, if you had an accountant and the accountant came to you and said, don't worry, I've done all of the sums in my head, you'd say, okay, well, it's great that you know how to do it, but could you check it with a calculator? And that's how AI can be. It is a useful tool, and it's absolutely useful in science, of course. The point of this campaign is responsibility, and I think there are very clear negative uses for AI. So, for example, if you generate a paper out of whole cloth, or if you allow an LLM to cite all your references and don't check that maybe all the data is false or some of the data is false. This could be the difference in 48% efficacy or 52% efficacy of a new pharmaceutical drug. And that could be depending on a hallucinated source or a hallucinated piece of data. Or if, for example, you, instead of doing the peer review yourself that you've signed up to, just pop it into an LLM and say, hey, is this up to snuff? That's not peer review. Then there's a causal link in the chain of what science is that's missing. So there are good use cases and bad use cases. And I'm only proposing, and we are only proposing, that the bad use cases are dealt with responsibly through enforcement, disclosure, and maybe detection.
In the letter, you talk about a real enforcement mechanism. Can you tell us more about how that would work in practice?
Yeah, so here I want to be very careful because, as I said, I am not a scientist, and I'm also not a technical expert in the least. And I know even still, actually only compared to real experts, a little bit about governance. So I wouldn't want to speak out of turn. My role is to try to convene this campaign and create this task force, this coalition, and change something in policy, not provide the technical solutions. Far smarter people than me will do that. At the same time, I have an understanding that there's a fair amount of debate in the community about various different types of provenance mechanisms. So could be fingerprinting, could be watermarking, and flowing from that, there are also potential enforcement mechanisms, borrowing of journals, or questions about provenance that then lead to disciplinary action and maybe financial sanction. I don't know the answer, and I don't propose to know the answer yet. When we build this coalition, because remember, the open letter is a campaign tool, and what sits underneath it will be the policy framework, and that'll be much more nuanced, much more detailed. Maybe we're going to discover it could be that actually, this aspect doesn't work. So maybe detection doesn't work. Maybe there's an arms race, and AI agents are always going to be able to beat detection. So we should actually focus instead on disclosure and enforcement. That could be the case. I don't know the answer yet, and I want to wait for the experts that we hopefully convene into this coalition to do the expert work to figure out what makes the most sense with the publishers as well as everybody else.
And Bennett, I've been around your website a bit at the GIEF or GIF or GF. You may choose. you've been actually working on a lot of things. You've been working on fake news. You've been working, as you said, on European defense. What's the next challenge, if you can read it for us?
Wow, the next challenge. As I said, in about a week, with my friend Brent van der Heijden, the CEO of Map Atlas, a piece, I think that it's going to be titled "Who Owns the Map on Data Sovereignty" is coming out. So that's going to be very interesting. We have right now 18 more commentaries lined up over the course of this year. So also all credit to our operations and program lead, Francesca, for organizing all of that. It is an enormous amount of work. It's almost a question of how long is a piece of string, because we have this piece on scientific ecosystem issues. We have something on water stress. We have done a piece on nuclear regulation. As I said, space governance, data governance, European defense integration. There's going to be something coming out. I think this is highly interesting to me personally, on polarization and where that comes from and what it means for a society. So challenges coming up. I like to say the thread running through all of our work is stability in our democracies. Anything that can credibly be linked to democratic resilience is interesting to us. All that we ask of our pieces is that it's a very high standard of research. All of these pieces have, at least 50 references, data visualizations, serious, undergo a level of peer review. It's not journalistic level, even though journalism is a very powerful and important tool too. And that they have policy recommendations, so that then we can take those pieces and put them on the desks of the policymakers and journalists, et cetera, that can hopefully do something about it.
Wow, it's a lot of work to do. I'd really like to see something about education, actually. I'm curious if you'll ever publish something about that, because I think it's incredible the amount of generative AI and other tools that students use in schools, even kids, even 8-year-old. I think it's ed tech is something that's left widely unexplored. So yeah.
So it's great that you mentioned that. We will, at some point, probably in the next 2 or 3 months, be publishing a joint piece with my friend, Dr. Sam Illingworth, who is the founder of Slow AI, specifically on education. So I will absolutely send it your way.
Please do. I can't wait to read it and potentially publish it. As my listeners know, I tend to publish articles randomly because I have to vent about things. Then the last question that I will ask you is to let our listeners once again know how they can help, support, and even find the Geopolitical Insight and Education Foundation, also called GIE Foundation. Let's like keep them up on track and on how to find you, how to support you, how to fund you even.
Sure. So thank you for that question. The first thing is our LinkedIn, which is growing rapidly, and through which I reached out to you, I think. So that publishes updates. All of our commentaries that we publish are there. Updates on the campaign are there. Various interesting papers, ideas, thoughts, even small things. We run a series called Responsible AI Concept Explainer, where I've touched on the Chinese room thought experiment and Gell-Mann amnesia, the streetlight effect, that kind of thing. So LinkedIn is great. And then that also links to our website. Our website has all of our research, all of our commentaries, also our campaign page, the open letter itself. More generally, what is any think tank, any independent think tank looking for? They're looking for funders, partners, and researchers. So I encourage anybody who's a funder, a potential partner, or a researcher to reach out. We love collaborating. We have this commentary series, and as I just mentioned, the potential for topics is vast. The test for the topics is it full of potential impact? Does it affect our democracies, hopefully in a positive way? And so if you have an idea, if you have maybe a policy centered idea, I'd love to hear it. Of course, also, I should say, for any funders that care about democracy and what we're trying to do, or maybe even more specifically, just responsible AI, I would also love to have that conversation. And we also have lots of partnerships with various organizations. And sometimes that might mean a joint commentary, or sometimes that might mean I'm partnered with an organization called KWU, and we're running a democracy essay contest. And I'm going to be one of the judges of that contest. So that sort of thing.
Okay, and with that, we will encourage all of our listeners to check out actually the website and the LinkedIn contact of GIF. You will find all the links in our show notes. Giacomo, I've seen you taking notes. Good. Thanks God you were there. And I will say thank you, Bennett, for joining us on the show today. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and it was a pleasure to ask you all these questions.
The pleasure was all mine. Thank you both so much, and really looking forward to the show.
Yeah, we will then say goodbye for now. This was the Legal for Tech, the podcast.
This episode was brought to you in partnership with DG Beetle. DG Beetle helps privacy professionals to stay up to date with the most important European documents in the AI, data and digital space every day. Curious to know more? Check out the link in our show notes.